Hello, wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of In Conversation with CCW Europe, the podcast series bringing together the leading and brightest minds in the world of customer management from across Europe. I'm Simon Hall, your host and industry analyst at CCW Europe, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Steve Gush, SVP of Digital Services at Foundever. Steve, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Yeah, great. How are you doing, first and foremost?
Very well, very well. It was good. A little bit of a train journey down today, but looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely, me too. And so we've joined forces today to unpack the ABCs of the building blocks that comprise the foundations of customer service or customer experience transformation. But before we dive into that, can you share a little bit of insight into your professional background? You know, what brought you to where you are today and what inspired your passion for designing customer and employee experience solutions?
Absolutely. Well, I think all of us have got a passion for customer experience because we're all customers. So to some degree, we've all got expertise in customer service. I've been in the industry with Foundever now for over 20 years. I appreciate I don't look old enough for that, but it was clearly a big paper round. I started my career really on the technology side, and way back sort of 20 years ago in the CX BPO industry, technology was all about enabling our agents. It's just making sure you got the contact to them and making sure they got access to data. And my role there was purely on technology and technology enablement. I managed to do that through my career and built my career first on a European basis, then on a global basis, first with Sykes and then with Foundever, really designing and building contact centers for some of the world's leading brands. Latterly, probably over the last 10 years ago, that changed. Technology was no longer an enabler, but it's really part of the service provision. And intertwining the technology enablement and that human enablement to deliver customer service and customer interaction management is what mattered. Probably started with automation and then really accelerated over the last few years, specifically with generative AI and the power that now gives us to really personalize and bring forward and enable much better outcomes from customer service.
Terrific stuff, a fantastic CV for sure. And so, okay, let's go big picture to start our CX transformation conversation. It's obviously mission critical for brands to have a seamless, effective, delightful customer experience, but there are many who struggle to tap into the value that excellent CX offers. So my question then is, for those looking to start or kickstart their CX transformation journey, what might be some first steps that they can take?
Well, I think the first steps is, what are your objectives? What are you trying to do with your customers? What is your customer matrix look like? Are you looking for lifetime value? Are you looking for quick serve? Are you looking for customer acquisition? It's all about setting that goal. Once you've set that goal and you've got a vision for what your customer, what your market, and how you want to interact with your customers, it's then, do you understand your customer? Do you understand how they want to be interacted with, how they expect to be served, and what are the jobs they have to get done? And then once you've got that, it's mapping that customer journey. And it really starts with understanding the customer journey. Then you can build your CX platform across that, from your website and your self-service, even through to unboxing or your customer acquisition piece, right the way through to what do you do when things go wrong and how do you interact, how do you manage when things go wrong with your customer, and then how do you build that relationship and make sure you've got a lifetime value from your customers.
Well, that sets up my next question perfectly, actually. And that was going to be, what might be some milestones that brands should be looking to hit on their CX transformation journey? You know, how can they ensure that their customer experience, customer support function is indeed a value driving one?
Well, I think for it to be a value driver, first of all, you've got to be where your customer is. And that historically was, were you on the high street or were you in the right physical location? Now it says, have you got the right channel access? And can you be contactable in a method that your customers want to contact you? And it depends on your service and your brand as to where that is. People could be at home, they could be in the office, they could be on the move. So different ways of interacting with your customers, from website to chat, social media to voice. It's that mix. It depends on your customer base, and it depends on the moment in time where you need to have that interaction with the customer to get that right mix.
And where does AI fit into this equation? There's obviously a new wave of AI technologies that are unlocking new value pools for forward-thinking brands. So what are some of the ways you've seen brands, implementing AI to transform their customer experience delivery?
Well, I think if you look into customer service delivery, there is right the way in how you're interacting with the customer. So AI is becoming prevalent there, making much better self-service content available, enable conversational AI to maybe automated conversations. But even when it comes through to that agent, with the rise of self-service, the rise of the sort of consumer and their ability to get information elsewhere, there is an increased proportion that your customers are pretty frustrated by the time they reach for a telephone. So now when you're building AI, there is a whole new agent skill set that needs to be managed. So how do you hire those people? And you can use AI to help identify the right traits in your agents. Then how do you train them? And how do you get them, enable them to practice with AI customers, not real customers, to be able to make sure they're confident with managing customer interactions? Then also on the day, how do you performance manage that agent and help them develop? So how do you look at each individual conversation and then identify the strengths and the weaknesses, build that into your performance and automated coaching? And then also, how are you presenting information to an agent in a way they can consume and build up that conversation with their own consumer? So how do you push the right information at the right moment in the right way that's going to be understandable for that agent to use in that interaction?
Well, let's dive a bit deeper into that then. What are some of the training programs that brands can use to train their agents?
Well, we use a lot in Foundever of AI training, which allows us to, as opposed to doing role play sort of studies as they come out of training, they actually have an AI customer. So think of a conversational AI or a chatbot, but reverse it. So the agent is now the agent, and the actual chatbot is the customer and asking customer questions, not answering those questions. That gives people a chance to practice and to get much more confident at dealing with consumers before they get onto the phones or before they get into those channels, to be able to manage those interactions. And the more you practice anything, the more confident you are. The more confident that somebody is when they're dealing with a customer, especially if that customer is stressed, the easier that you can manage that conversation and the easier you can manage the emotions around that conversation. So it's really enabling us to allow people to practice before they get onto the production floor and before they manage those customer interactions.
And how might CX leaders go about bringing their agents on this journey with them and getting the buy-in from their agents?
Well, I think the majority of agents, and bearing in mind the majority of agents are pretty young, they're using AI on a daily basis. And I think traditionally when we recruited agents, we were looking for people that had typing skills or had search skills or had knowledge skills or were skilled in those products. AI is filling those gaps, and now we're looking for agents that are much more, are they comfortable with using AI? Are they comfortable with reading AI and seeing that that's actually the right answer for this customer in this rate of mind, and how they're actually comfortable with managing problems and resolving problems, and are they comfortable with managing customer and customer emotions? So that becomes much more important now for an agent. But bringing your agent on board, you've got to look at those skill sets with the new tooling that an agent has got, because it's a different skill set than a traditional agent that was just using scripts or hard training.
Yeah, and how would you look for those people then? What are the characteristics of those agents that you might be looking for?
I think you're ones that have just got a genuine passion for customer service and people that genuinely connect with people and can have that emotional intelligence to be able to build that connection. The rest of it, the AI can augment the agent to provide that, providing them with next best actions, providing them with the right knowledge, providing them with the right training and practice. But there's certain things that are much more difficult to train, which is that desire to want to help somebody and that desire to want to fix somebody's problem.
Yeah, we'll segue off that topic of conversation then.
Yeah.
How can brands strike the right balance between using automation whilst maintaining the personalised touch, the human touch?
Absolutely. I think this is where generative AI is making a much bigger impact on chatbots and voice bots than previously. With that generative AI, it was very script based, and we've all done that, right? We've all been on that phone trying to book those cinema tickets, having to repeat the same thing 20 times, and then ending up dropping to an agent anyway because it didn't understand us. Now that's the technology has evolved to such a level where it can detect not just is the bot answering the consumer's question, but is the consumer's emotion changing? And it can choose the right moment to then push that through to an agent. And the critical factor, if you're pushing it from a bot to an agent, make sure that agent knows what the conversation has been had beforehand. There is nothing worse than getting trapped in some kind of bot, then being passed on to somebody for them to ask you to explain exactly the same thing and provide exactly the same information again. But it's also a case of understanding your customer. If you know that that person is phoning because something's broken and it's urgent, try and understand that intent as early as possible and put it through to a real person.
Yeah.
If they just want to find out their bank balance, they just want to find out the time of a flight, they just want to find out some quick information, then push that to a bot. Where it's really having that intelligent routing and knowing what the emotional state and the intent is of your customers to be able to guide it to the right place that suits that customer need.
Okay, great. So we talked about some of the advantages there, but obviously when it comes to implementing AI, there are some significant roadblocks that lie in wait. So can you unpick maybe 2 or 3 of the most common challenges that you're seeing when it comes to implementing AI into the CX operation?
Absolutely. Data and knowledge content. So AI is amazing, but if you've not got the right data and that data is not up to date, if you've not got the right knowledge content and that knowledge content is up to date, it's going to provide the wrong answers. The old technology adage of garbage in, garbage out still exists in our AI-driven world, except it's now multiplied and is often hidden and more frustrating. So making sure you have the right data, making sure you've got that right view of the customer and understanding their intent is the key bit. And that flips into the sort of legal and regulatory aspects of, are you using that data correctly? Are you bearing in mind the privacy rights of that consumer? And are you ensuring that you're not building in bias if you're enabling AI to make decisions?
Well, let's dive into both of those then, starting with the data piece. How can brands get their data house in order so as to be able to deliver one-to-one interactions to everybody at scale?
Absolutely. It's integrating your systems. It's I say it's as simple as that. It's a simple answer to that, but that's not simple to do because you've got so many complex systems, especially in large organizations, from the order system to the finance system to the HR system. All of this needs to be integrated and building data lakes, building that repository of all that data and having that single view of the customer. The traditional aspects of CRM and logging those calls are even more vital than they've ever have been to ensure you've got that accurate being the correct word for that, track record of previous interactions with that customer. Yeah. The beauty, of course, is that prior to sort of a lot of this AI revolution, you were relying on the agent typing in that conversation. Yeah. But now with speech to text and with transcriptions of calls and summarization of that call, you can ensure that every one of those conversations are logged. Yeah. And it's logging those conversations, summarizing them, storing them into central repositories that's mixed into their history of dealing with the customer, what they've bought, previous conversations they've had with the brand, any other information like that, and making sure it's summarized and pushed to that agent so that it can see exactly what that customer is. That's really the ethics of personalization as well. Yeah. People want personalization, right? We still love going to our local butchers or our local shops because they know us and they know what we want. The key is, how do you do that at scale? And how do you do that utilizing AI? So when you're dealing with a global brand, you still have that feeling that they understand you as a customer and they understand what you've used them for, how you use them, and what your job's to be done are.
Mm-hmm. Without naming any brand names, have you got some concrete examples of those who are doing that really well right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's no surprise that the newer organizations that have not got legacy platforms are the ones that are really beating that scope. So if you're building something with this mentality, then there's much more integrated solutions around. It's more those legacy clients. Even more importantly, it's companies that are legacy, that are big, that have grown through acquisition. That's where the challenges are, and they're the guys that are really struggling because it's hard to get that single view of the customer, especially if you're in financial services and you've acquired an insurance company and you've acquired a retail bank and you've acquired an investment bank, and trying to get that single view of the customer across all those different platforms is really difficult. But if you're a new organization or a new bank that's built everything around the customer and the platform to do that, you've got it all in one place. And they're the guys that are accelerating in this world.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And just sort of picking up on the personalization piece that you mentioned and moving even beyond personalization towards anticipation, what are some of the smartest ways you've seen businesses use data to actively predict what customers need before they've even revealed what those needs are?
I think with anything, when you're predicting, there is that delicate balance between sort of wowing somebody because they think, oh, this guy really gets me, to absolutely frightening people to, oh my God, how did they know that? So you've got to be really careful and make sure you're predicting things based on information that the customer knows you've got from them and is happy for you to have about them. So I'd say that it's really that. It's making sure that you're predicting something that's accurate and validating that before you push it too intently, because if you predict something that's wrong, then it can have a very detrimental impact of your customer interaction.
Yeah. And what about how brands can use their CX data beyond the CX function, the customer support function? How can brands use CX data to sort of inform or influence, product design or product development?
Well, I think traditionally we've relied on information from customer service by asking a CSAT survey. So we've gone in, we said, so what do you think of our products? What do you think of our service? What do you think about this? And people have to then make a conscious effort to respond to those things, which is frustrating. I mean, point one, people only do it at either end of the spectrum. They'll fill out a CSAT survey if they're really happy with the service, or they'll fill out a CSAT survey if they're really unhappy with the service. But you're missing, because you're getting the extremes, you're missing those conversations right in the middle. And that's all about the conversation. So you have that data, but it's in call recordings, it's in transcripts. It's how do you use analytics to drive that so you can understand the true intent of what that customer thinks about your products, where the challenges are, what they love about it. They're telling you that information on every interaction that you have with them. So if you're using speech analytics, really understanding those interactions and then feeding that, not relying on asking the questions, you're getting a much more balanced view of what your population really feels about your company and where are the strengths and weaknesses, and then what can you attack in the way of your products, your services, your processes, the way you're interacting with them.
Yeah, there's tremendous value to that.
Yeah,
right?
hugely so.
Permeate the whole entire enterprise.
Absolutely. And this is when it comes into where do you build your ROI in your customer interaction as well. There is that untapped mine of information about the products and services and how it can help you formulate your strategy as an organization. There is the traditional stuff that we always look at, which is and measure it against revenue generation and customer lifetime value. But there's also understanding what the cost is to serve your customers and how is the contact center managing that cost to serve. You can get two customers. One can spend £2,000, one can spend £200. But the value to the customer may be more from the £200 guy because he spent £200, you've made your margin, and he's walked away happy, rather than the guy who's maybe spent £2,000, but he's done 27 calls to your contact centre, he's called an engineer that's truck rolled twice, he's returned the product 3 times. The cost to serve that guy is completely eroded it. Yeah. So it's the cost to serve as well as the revenue generation, as well as the insights you can get, and all that can come from your interactions in your CX.
That's great. And then we mentioned there before about training your agents. I just want to go back to that a minute. And what other training can you offer agents so that they can become those product experts and then they can start to deliver some of the things that you just talked about?
But increasingly, I think you train your agents now to ask the right questions to understand the right content, because you've got your knowledge bases and you've got AI that can search for that. So the time previously you would spend training people on process and product, you can now train people on conversation, managing emotions, and asking the right question to be able to make sure you get the right answer, relying on your tools in front of you to be able to get those answers for you. So you don't necessarily need to train the agents on that, as the systems can help provide that information to an agent in a way that they can consume.
Okay, I guess that kind of training is, was more enjoyable for the agents, and would that then have an impact on employee satisfaction and those kind of metrics?
Absolutely. I think that, the contact center industry has got a reputation of being a high attrition industry. People either love that industry or they don't. And that's because it's difficult. And really, people go into that industry and they thrive because they want to help people. Now, if they feel they can't help people because they're hampered by process, they haven't got the right information at hand to be able to help that customer, that's what drives frustration, and that's what drives agent dissatisfaction. And we've got a saying within Foundever that our agent satisfaction or employee satisfaction is what drives the customer satisfaction. Because if you're dealing with somebody that's happy, that's content, that can help you, you're going to be much more satisfied as a customer. And that employee is going to be happy because they're getting fulfillment from providing that help.
Yeah, and what are some of the core skills that CX leaders should be, developing within their teams to prepare for the future? And then on the flip side, what can CX leaders themselves do to, develop professionally to prepare for this future forward workforce?
Absolutely. I think we've got to rewrite how we run a contact center. So I think when we run a contact center now, it's all about average handle time. It's all about speed of competency. It's all about these services. But it should be about how are you driving that response to the customer. And all of those metrics will look after themselves if you're providing the right answer to the customer in an effective and efficient way. So I think that it's getting away from that metrics and that hard battery factory mentality and getting more into how are you becoming problem solvers and how are you becoming relationship managers. So how are you building a relationship with your customer and how are you resolving your customer's problems. And I think they're a different skill set to just give somebody the information and try and make that phone call as short as possible. It's irrelevant how long the conversation is if the outcome is what you need, and it's the outcome that's more important. So it's focus on outcomes, not focus on the impact of the actual work that you're doing.
That's interesting. And what might be some, specific KPIs that you might want to measure agents on in this day and age?
Yeah, I think in this day and age, it's really their satisfaction is key.
Yeah.
It's absolutely key. And I think it's also the sort of what are they driving with the customer in the way of net promoter scores? So how are they driving that customer to want to talk positively about them, and how are they so I think we've always gone into what is your average handle time, but it's really how often is your first time fix? So how often are you fixing that conversation with that agent and making that customer a happy customer as they leave there, or changing that mode? So we should reward agents much higher. If they've got a happy customer to start with and a happy customer at the end, that's good. But if they've got an unhappy customer to start off with and a happy customer at the end, that's amazing, and that's where they should be rewarded.
Let's go big picture again then to wrap us up. And what do you think are some of the biggest shifts that you see coming to the fore in customer experience over the next 12 to 18 months?
And this is an issue one I've been thinking about this a long time, because obviously we've gone through such an amount of change over the last sort of 2 or 3 years, especially with the rise of generative AI, which has kicked off so many other functions. I think the biggest shift is going to be adoption of that at scale. It's going to be people using those technologies that really drive the right outcomes and that are focused on driving those outcomes rather than the actual service and managing the operation and the cost of the operation. It's more, what are the outcomes compared to the cost of the operation, which is going to be key.
That's great, Steve. And last question for you then. For the companies who are looking to future-proof their CX, what would be one piece of advice that you have? What might be a first step that they should take today?
Do you really understand what your customers are trying to do? So when they contact you, when they're using the product, do you understand where they are, what their state is, their emotional state, and their situation around them, and how do they want to be contacted with? Because if you understand your customer, you can serve that customer better. And if you serve your customer better, you build a customer for life.
Steve, great insight to finish on. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. It's been great chatting to you.
Thank you. So that brings to a close this episode of In Conversation with CCW Europe. But please do stick around on the CCW Europe website, where you can find so much great content related to the customer experience and customer service. Thank you so much again to Steve for joining me. Thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, goodbye.